For this lecture, we're going to be taking a look at the long run in perfect competition. To do that, we're going to have to, sort of get to a bit more understanding of what the different curves mean in general in the market. So remember that an industry is the addition of all of the individual supply curves. So remember that the supply curve of the individual firm was the marginal cost curve above the AVC. So the marginal cost curve above the AVC is the individual supply curve. As you add those all together, you end up with the long run supply curve. Now you're never going to be able to, you're never going to be asked, I should say, to turn the short run curves into the industry supply curve. You're just going to be asked to make sure you understand the idea of market short run supply curve is just a summation of all the firm supply curves. Now, your long run equilibrium for a firm is going to be the normal profit. It's the break even price, which should make sense if you think about the idea of what a perfect competitor is. Because if firms are earning profits in the short run, if the ATC is below your Mr. DARP curve at the profit maximizing quantity, then firms will enter the market. Well, if they enter the market, that means that there are more firms, supply increases. If supply increases, when that occurs in the market, then your price falls. Well, if price falls in the market, then your Mr. DARP curve falls. And that'll take you to a long run equilibrium. The opposite will be true for losses as well. If you are incurring losses, if your ATC is above your Mr. DARP curve at the profit maximizing quantity, well, then firms will, in the long run, exit the market. If they exit the market, supply shifts left, supply decreases. One of the effects on the market equilibrium of supply decreasing is an increase in price. An increase in price in the market increases your Mr. DARP curve, it shifts it upwards. And that, therefore, will take you to long run equilibrium once again. So let's see what this looks like. This is a side-by-side graph. This is something that you're likely going to be asked to at least interpret, if not draw. So it's important that you understand this. On the left-hand side, we have the market. So you have your supply curve and you have your demand curves. You can just label them demand and supply, or S and D. You don't need the MS or MD for market supply, market demand. Don't need that. Just S and D are fine. If we look at our initial setup, this is our initial supply curve. This is our initial demand curve. This is a side-by-side graph because the market is to the left of the firm. Sometimes you'll see the market referred to as the industry. They both mean the same thing. So the market price, the market equilibrium price, sets your Mr. DARP curve, and that is how you should draw it out. You should draw a dotted line going from your equilibrium price over to your firm, with the same price being your Mr. DARP curve, which I'm outlining right here. You have your swooshing MC coming through, and your ATC at that initial output is below. So if you look at MC equals MR, the profit is that quantity, your MC equals MR, that quantity, down to your ATC, over to the y-axis. The rectangle that I'm filling in now, that's your profit box in the short term. Now, since this firm is earning profits, that means that more firms will enter the market. As more firms enter the market, supply shifts right, as you see here on the market. Just outlined the second supply curve in the long run. That means your price, as outlined here, falls. You draw a new dotted line from your equilibrium, your second equilibrium, over to your firm. That means that your firm's demand falls, meaning your firm's price falls. That takes you to your long run equilibrium price, where it's a break even. The opposite would be true for firms experiencing losses, you expect the supply curve to shift left, which moves your Mr. Sharp curve upward, as opposed to downward, as you see here. You will be expected to be able to graph this and understand what it means in terms of price falls, quantity for the firm decreases, but quantity in the market increases. So it is important that you understand all of those distinctions and be able to read these graphs. Now, of course, once again, opposite would be true for if firms were exiting the market due to losses. Now, what does this mean for efficiency in the long run? The perfect competitor is the only completely efficient market. It's the only one. You have productive efficiency because your ATC is at its minimum in the long run. That's what we mean when we say productive efficiency. Your ATC is at a minimum. It's the only market structure that is going to have that. And it operates where your price equals your marginal cost. That is allocative efficiency. And that should make sense since price is equal to demand and your marginal cost is equal to supply for the firm. So what we really have here is demand equals supply. That's our basic idea of efficiency that we've been discussing this whole time. So when supply equals demand or demand equals supply, that is allocatively efficient. So that's just another distinction to make when we're looking at firms and talking about equilibrium. But once again, perfectly competitive firm is the only one that's going to have productive and allocative efficiency. So keep that in mind as we move forward looking at other market structures.